Right, let's go for it. Choftes Omid Aleph, 2 lines from the end. And you may want to put everybody on mute just to make sure. That's fine. Everybody can come off mute if they so want to. Yeah, so if you do that, Peter, for us all, thank you very much. Let's make a start. Tony Arvo, that's a nice name. If anything, you would have thought it was a female name, but Tony Arvo Bered Rab Zera. There we are, Arvo, the son of Rab Zera. Haven't heard that is used very, it's not a common name, I don't think, for people getting the Aliyah. Yamod Arvo Ben. Haven't heard that often, if at all. But anyway, his name was Arvo, the son of Rab Zera. And he learned the following point. We've been speaking until about kavana, if you remember, having intention for other people to be yotze the shofar. So moving on from there, says the Gemara, kol habrochos kulon. That's a bit strong. Kol habrochos kulon. All brochos, all of them. I don't think it's just the majority. Sometimes you say Yerubai kakulai. The majority is like, oh no. Kol habrochos kulon avhal pi sheyotza moitzi. Even if the person has already fulfilled her duty, the person can again make that bracha for other people. This is the view of Abel, the son of Reb Zera. So again, a typical example is the shofar blowing. Person has blown the shofar already. He may want to go to other individuals who couldn't get to shul. And as we've seen here in this statement, there's no problem about making a bracha for someone else and then blowing the shofar. You can do that. How does this work? We'll see. Chutz mi birkas halechem birkas hayayin. You can't do that for bread and wine. Woo, this is going to cause a bit of a problem. We're talking about Kiddush, lechem, bread and wine. She'im lo yotza moitzi. If you yourself are not yotze, or it means haven't yet been yotze, then yes, you can include a lot of people. You can be motzi other people. V'im yotza, however, if you have already been yotze, einoi moitzi. You cannot be motzi other people. Interesting. Let's have a look at the Rashi, please. About 8 lines up. Afal pi sheyotza moitzi. With all brachas for mitzvahs, shaharei. This is a very important Rashi. Shaharei, I think we might have mentioned this principle before. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bozeh the mitzvahs. We are all brothers, sisters, with others. Arevim means more than that, even guarantors for other people in the performance of mitzvahs, which means we are responsible as much as we can to help other individuals perform mitzvahs. If you're a guarantor, it means you can be called upon to supply money, if acting as a guarantor. The same thing here. You can make a bracha for someone else because I'm a guarantor, and it's up to me. In fact, we learned this from Sukkim in the Torah, that the whole of Yisrael is considered as one unit, and therefore, even if I've done a mitzvah, I've got to do what I can to enable other people to perform mitzvahs, including in that is making a bracha for them. However, says the next Rashi, chutz mibirkas halechem v'hayayin. Besides the bracha for bread and wine. What does that mean? And what do we say? With bread and wine, it doesn't work. If you are eating something yourself, then it will work. Yeah? Look at the Rashi, please. A very important Rashi here. Usha'a, have you got it? 5 lines up. Usha'a birkas peirus v'reichni, or reichoni. Similarly, for other fruits, and reach, which means a smell, barabinim besomim, she'enon choiva, where there's no obligation. Elo she'osa lehonis min oilam hazeh b'lo bracha. Oh yes, we know the rule, forbidden to derive benefit without making a bracha. So if we make a bracha before we have a drink, before we have something to eat, but nevertheless, there's no mitzvah involved. Oh yes, there's a mitzvah, maybe keeping yourself fit and healthy, so you've got to eat something. Not people starving, but there's no particular mitzvah. Have a look, next two lines of Rashi. Ubozu ein kan arvus. You're not acting as a guarantor. I'm not a guarantor that you should now have an ice cream. I'm not a guarantor that you should have a Coca-Cola right now, or even a wonderful, what shall I say, a sandwich, even a nice meat sandwich. I'm not a guarantor that you have to have that. Have a look at Rashi. You're not obliged to have something to eat right now. Lo lishani v'lo livrach. If I'm acting as a guarantor, I could say to you, actually, maybe health-wise a good idea anyway. Don't eat so much and don't make a bracha. I appreciate if you want this wonderful salt beef sandwich, you've got to make a bracha beforehand, but you're not obliged to, so I can't act as a guarantor for that. However, if there's a mitzvah to perform, in other words, Tkiya Shofar, I'm a guarantor. I've got to do what I can to help you perform the mitzvah. And you can't get out of this mitzvah. You've got to do it as long as you're capable and well enough. So therefore, I can make a bracha for you, even though I'm not doing a mitzvah right now. Why not? Because I'm using my guarantor card, which means I've got to do what I can to enable you to perform mitzvahs. But if you just want your salt beef sandwich, I'm not a guarantor that you've got to have your salt beef sandwich. So therefore, the rule is, if I was eating that sandwich, I could make a bracha and be motzi you. But if I'm not being yotza right now, I cannot just make a bracha for you to enjoy the hamotzi or the wine or the fruit, waits, if I'm not eating it myself. Okay? Says the Gemara, and this is where we get into this interesting question. Boy, Robber, the last two words of the line, as we turn the page. What about Birkas Halechem Shel Matzah or Birkas Hayayin Shel Kiddush? Right. I can understand, remember we spoke about the wine, on a normal Sunday afternoon, some people, particularly if you've got some French blood, you may want to finish the meal with a glass of wine. I'm not a guarantor that you have to have your glass of wine. So therefore, unless I'm drinking myself, I cannot be motzi you in the Ber Pri HaGofen. But that's not the question of the Gemara. The Gemara's question is, what about Ber Pri HaGofen, which is coupled with Kiddush? Can you see that? Mahu. What is the rule? Have a look at Rashi. What Birchas HaLechem are we talking about here? Shel achilas matzah. Shemevorchin, the different ways of learning this. Lefoneha hamoitzi. Before you have your matzah, you say hamoitzi lechem min haaretz and achilat al achilas matzah. Fine. Now, we said before, if I am being yotze, then at the same time, I can make a bracha for you. That's fine. What happens if I'm not right now partaking of my matzah for Seder night? I may already have my Seder night and I'm going now to a home of someone who hasn't yet had their Seder, and maybe I'm helping them out with the Seder. Can I make hamotzi for them without me eating. What's the question here? Again, look at the next Rashi. Ubirkas hayayin shemavorchim lifnei kiddush. You see, the wine and the hamoitzi are not normal brachas just to have a glass of wine. Have a look at the next Rashi, please. Mahu. What is the rule about them? Ala achilas matzah, on the bracha of achilas matzah, umakadesh Yisrael, or the end of Kiddush, lo tiboyeloch. That's not a question. Why? The chayva ninhu. It's a chiyuv to make a bracha ala achilas matzah. It's a chiyuv. After all, that's a bracha that goes with the mitzvah. It's a chiyuv to say mekadesh Yisrael or mekadesh Shabbos. He says mekadesh Yisrael. Interesting. Might be talking about Yom Tov. Mekadesh Yisrael b'hazmanim. So yes, the second part of Kiddush, you've got to make Kiddush on Yom Tov and on Shabbos. Carry on Rashi, third line down. Umapik. Mapik means I can bring out, I can be yotzi you, moitzi you with those brachas. That's not the question. Ela birkas hamoitzi, the bracha hamoitzi lechem min haaretz, or the bracha of wine, which is coupled with the achilas matzah and coupled with the kiddush mekadesh hashabbos. Mi boy idon. That is the question we are asking, and that's where the Gemara at the bottom of the previous page, the question we've raised here. Continue Rashi. Got it, fourth line down of Rashi. Why? She'ein bo'os, those items, when we make a bracha, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, let's stick with that for the minute. Elo lefi shamavorech tzorich yito. The person is going to eat the matzah. Fine. The person making kiddush is going to drink the wine. Ve'ef shele honos below bracha. So you've got to make an al achilas matzah. You've got to eat the matzah. Therefore, you've got to make hamotzi lechem min haaretz. That's one way to look at it. In other words, I've got to make a bracha. Do you want to do the mitzvah of eating matzah? Yes. Which means I've got to make first hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So therefore, it joins with the achilas matzah, and therefore I could go to someone's house, in this instance, not eat the matzah, but make hamotzi lechem for that other individual, because it's a mitzvah. Do you understand why? Because it's coupled with the eating of the matzah, which is a mitzvah. That's one. Inami lo toim iu. Rashi continued, this inami is not or, it's if you want to say lo toim iu, if he's not going to taste, I efsha de lo yohiv le lechad minayu lemitam. It's impossible. If I'm making, I can't give it to anybody else. Imagine I'm making a seder and I'm saying alachilas matzah, but I can't give it to another individual to eat unless uboi bracha. It's got to have a bracha coupled with it. Which bracha? Hamotzi. So therefore, it itself becomes a mitzvah. Okay? Back to our Gemara. Mahu. Kiven as it's an obligation. Mapik. Have a look at the next Rashi. We're on Kuftes Omid base. Kiven dechoivahu. As it's actually. You may want to put people on Peter on mute, please. Thank you. Kiven the chayvahi, choftes on base. We're talking about making a bracha of achilas matzah together with hamotzi. Can you be motzi other people without eating? Kiven the chayvahi, says Rashi, achilas matzah is a chayva. It's an obligation olov on the other individual. And as we said before, everyone acts as a guarantor, so which means I can make those brachas, but it's ef shashaloi bahano. You can't perform the mitzvah of matzah without eating it. This is similar to the previous Rashi. It's impossible without a bracha. Nimtzeis, you therefore find ha-mitzvah tuluya. The performance of achilas matzah is dependent on a bracha of hana. I can't do that mitzvah without enjoying and making a bracha moitzi lechem min haaretz. So therefore, maybe in this instance, I can make a bracha even if I'm not eating from the matzah. Do you understand? If it would be a normal, I don't know, Monday, and I'm having a piece of matzah or even a piece of bread, and the other individual is having a piece of bread, if I'm not eating that bread, I can't be motzi him, because there's no obligation on me to ensure him. That's his business. I would tell him maybe don't eat at all. But in this instance where he has this obligation, remember we spoke about arvus? I'm a guarantor to try and ensure that the other individual does a mitzvah, right? I want him to eat matzah. You can only eat matzah if you made a bracha v'amotzi before it. Therefore, you join the two together, and therefore, maybe in this instance, I can make a bracha even hamotzi for another individual, even though I'm not eating. Or I could make kiddush for someone else, even and including the Borei Pri HaGofen, even though I am not drinking the wine. That's one way. Back to our Gemara, third line down. Oh, Dilmor, perhaps. Brocha, love, chovahi. It's true. Everything we've said until now is true. But the bottom line is, look at Rashi, O Dilmor, birkas hahano, love, chova, lemitzia asya. It's coming for the mitzvah. She'af b'chol hahano is hino heges. It's the bracha of hamotzi. I can never make, even though it's coupled with this eating of the matzah. Similarly, the Kiddush wine, even though it's coupled with being motzi, the person for Kiddush, but the Borei Pri HaGofen, I cannot make because it's a bracha of Hanor, and a bracha of Hanor I cannot make for someone else unless I'm enjoying that wine or that bread or that matzah myself. Okay, that's the two sides of the argument. And let's see the answer. Says the Gemara, Tor Shema. Come in here. That was a question, if you remember, that Rava asked. But now we have a statement. Da'oma Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, actually, normally, this is very late. This was Rava asking the question, although there seems to be questions who this was, a Rechova. Rav Ashi is going to make a statement in the following way. Please look. Ki havinan beira Poppy. Papi? When I was in the home of Rav Papi, Hava Makadesh Lom. He made Kiddush for us. Fine. That doesn't tell you anything. Maybe he was actually having Kiddush himself. When normally it's I think they call it, the actual translation, a sharecropper, or it's somebody who was working for him. So later on, someone else came in, midabro, normally means from out in the fields outside. So this other fellow came late. He was a latecomer. Hava Makadesh Lahu. He made Kiddush for those other latecomers, even though he was making a Borei Pri HaGofen and not drinking any more from the wine. In fact, he'd already made a Borei Pri HaGofen, it sounds like, when he made Kiddush. So what do you see from there? You see from there that you can make a bracha. It sounds like this Arise who came in, he wanted Rav Poppy to be motzi him, and you can do that. So what do you see from there? That you can make a bracha for another individual, not just Mikra Megillah, or not just Lishma Kol Shofar, but you can make a bracha for bread and wine if it's coupled with a mitzvah. And just to clarify that, if I can ask you, Peter, let's have a look at number 1, the first one I sent in order, the Mishnah Berurah. There we are. Look at the top Daled. Yochel odom lekadesh la'acherim af al pi she'enoi oichel imohem. Even though he's not eating with them. Dulitidhu habi mokums. For them, this is where they're eating, and it sounds like he's going back home. Bi'afal gab de birkas hayayin. Even though just a glass of wine, I can't be motzi other people because I'm no guarantor. Who asked you to have a glass of wine? If he's not enjoying the wine himself, you can only make kiddush if it's coupled with a bracha of wine. Kiddush Hayom Domi. It's equivalent to the actual Kiddush Hayom, which is the Mekadesh HaShabbos. V'yochel lohitzion afal pi she'einu nene. Even if he is not enjoying the wine himself. Continue the next line. This is Hagor, which is Ramosha Isilus, adds Afilu b'Kiddush shel Yom Shachris. Wow. Even in the morning, which is not the main Kiddush Friday night, well, as we know, Kiddush on Shabbos morning is only just a Ber Pri HaKofen, but it's Mutter, La, so is Cain. However, there's quite a point here. I know the Gemara said he could do it, and if you remember, the Gemara said that Rav Poppy did this for his worker who came in. The question is, who was this worker? Could this worker have made Kiddush himself? So there's a final line here. V'hu she'enom yodim. Those individuals cannot make Kiddush themselves. Okay? V'hu she'enom yodim. Let's have a look at some of these Mishnah Berurahs, please. Tezayin.
Can you repeat, please?
Oh, sorry, if we can go to Tes Zayin in the Mishnah Berurah. So do you understand the point he's made? His point, we paskin like our Gemara, but it's not clear whether that's only, got it, Tezah, yep. Very important point here, look at this. Have you got the Tes Zayin, first line? Yeah, you got it there? V'hu hadin liktanim. For children too. Mutter lekadesh afal pi she'eino oichel moem kedei lachanchom b'mitzvos, to teach them how to make kiddush. For who again she'einom yodim lekadesh ba'atzmom. Wow, so there's quite an important condition attached here. If these people cannot make kiddush for themselves. Wow. Have a look at Yud Ches. And he's not going to eat with them. Drop down 2 more. Yes. Dekai Malon, we hold. We are of the opinion. Kol Birchas Hanenin. All brachas which are made for enjoyment. In other words, when I say it's for enjoyment, it's when you're having a benefit from an item. Ein Odom Moitzi Es Chaveroi. You can't normally be motzi your friend imhu atzmoi eino nene, if he himself eino nene. Oz rak bedova shehu chayv. I put the oz in the wrong place, I think. Im hu atzma eino nene oz, comma. Rak b'dova shu chiyuv kegoin kiddush ukiyotze by. The actual second bracha, which is the kiddush mekadesh hashabbos, odom moitzi chaveroi kumavua hakol b'simen kuf zayin. Now, mitzvah. So normally you wouldn't be able to get away with this, but you can in this instance. Have a look at your tests. Afilu, even if he's not eating with them. Rotzaloima, after shom. In that case, kol kiddush who rak bo priya. Well, sorry, what is your test? Can you just scroll the other way again? I think that Afilu is talking about Shabbos morning, isn't it? A bit higher. I want to know what that your test stand goes on. So drop down a bit more. No, the other way. The other way. And you go a bit more. More. Ah, there we are. There's the yud test. Can you see the yud test? Afilu. That's it. The next line. Afilu b'kiddush shel yom. Even the kiddush of the morning. You can see that little yud test in brackets. That takes us to the Mishnah Berurah. Back down to the Mishnah Berurah, please. Afilu rotzaloima. After Shom Kola Kiddush Urak Ber Priyagofen. What is Kiddush on Shabbos morning? It's only Ber Priyagofen. Mikomokom Kivadehi mitzvah, as it is a mitzvah. Vikoroi Niskan Shalobishvil Hano. It's not really just have a glass of wine. It's made, you're making Kiddush. Ella, there's a mitzvah olov kishar mitzvahs. Mishum Ochi, because of this, Moitzi Acherim Afal Pi She'eino Nene. Kiddush halayla. Drop down. Okay. Now, a bit more. Let's skipping a little bit. This is important. Chaf. For who she'enom yodim. Drop down. No, it's the next chaf. 2 to 3 down. For who she'enom yodim. Remember the big condition. You can be mitzi someone else if you're not eating a kiddush. If they don't know themselves how to do that, de'im yodim lekadish ba'atzmon einoi yochol loitzion b'kiddush sheloi. In that instance, he can't make kiddush. Im eino yotze oz, if he himself is not yotze at that time. Ba'atzmon b'ha kiddush. Okay. However, next line. V'hapri chodosh, one of the very early achronim, but poskim, b'simen tak pehe, that's 585, choylek. He's got shoulders, and he's arguing with this Shulchan Aruch. Wow. And what does he say? The Svirele, he holds the Bechol Gavna Yocholo Tzion. You can always be Moitzi someone with a Ber Priyagofen, even if they could do so themselves. And that's when you're not eating, of course. Ubesefer Artsos Hachayim Siman Ches, says the Mishnah Berurah, Masik. The conclusion is Gamkein, also, Dimidino, strictly speaking, Yochol Loitzioi Bechol Gavna. You can always be Moitzi someone else, even if they can read. They could say Ber Priyagofen. You can do it for them. Lechatchila, next line, Ha mitzvah sheyikadesh ba'atzmai. The mitzvah is he should make himself. Kiven shu boki. If he knows how to make a bracha, let him make his own bracha. V'gam chavero hamotzioi ena yotzi ataba kiddush. As the person who is going to make the kiddush is not being yotze, it would be better to pass the cup of wine to someone who actually can make that kiddush. Okay, next piece. The Isha Almona. Imagine there's sadly a widow. She'eina yodas ba'atzma. She can't make kiddush herself. Eich lekadish, how to make kiddush. And lo suchal, and she can't manage to go and eat with someone else. Lishma kiddush. Kevin, next line. You may want to put this on. Kevin Shane, you sorry, that's shop. Basically, what he's saying is that's exactly what we would do. Someone that will be no problem whatsoever, someone who cannot make kiddush, going in, making kiddush for them, even in the morning, even though you're not actually drinking the wine, you can certainly do that. But without any problem at all, if you yourself are going to enjoy the wine, then there's no problem at all. So obviously Friday night, that's very simple. Everybody's partaking of them. Certainly the person making kiddush is going to be drinking the wine, so he can certainly be see everybody else with the wine. But even if he was not drinking the wine, he's just passing, and that could happen. Imagine the rabbi on the way home from shul pops into someone. He's on his way home, but he can quite happily, according to this, make kiddush for them. If they can't make kiddush themselves, including the Ber Pri Gofen and even the Hamoitz, the Ber Pri Gofen. But if they can, it would be better if they made that bracha themselves. Now, I've got another quote in there, I think, Peter. What was the second? What was the second quote there? That was from there. Oh, yes. Have a look at Yud Tes. That goes back to, there's not a Shabbos halacha. This is the big Yud Tes. Thank you. In the Shulchan Aruch, this is from chapter 167. Mi she'oina oichel eina yochel lavorech bechas hamotzi. In the normal case of a piece of bread, there's no way you can make a bracha. So on a Sunday, if you're passing by, then there's no way you could make a hamotzi, even if the person doesn't know how to make a bracha. You'd have to say it together with them, perhaps, but you can't make a bracha mimotzi or oichlim. That's quite clear. Let's have a look. Anything there I wanted to point out? Yeah, nothing. Birchas hamotzi. Anything extra we've got there? No, not really. Come on, it's all, funny. Okay. The third source, Peter. No, I think that's the fourth. The fourth one I sent you, the one before that. Oh, yeah, that's the one. Thank you. Reish Yud Gimel, talking about fruits. Ein hamaborach moitzi acherim eloim ken yochad v'yishte emayim. Yeah, unless the person's eating this fruit, you cannot make a bracha. Yeah, and there he says, so again, if you are having a fruit, you can make a bar pioates and eat the fruit, and then the other person doesn't need to make a bracha. However, you cannot do that and just make a bracha bar pioates if the other individual is eating. Have a look, please, at the Shulchan Aruch. I think it's Yud Daled, is it? I feel nothing. Anything else we wanted to mention? Yes.
They seem to be saying.
Hello.
Mervyn, your question.
Hi. Sorry, I joined a bit late. There's two things.
Here, hold on. There seem to be a few people talking.
Might be wrong.
No, I'm sorry. I'm on the M4, not driving.
Oh, right. Fair enough. M4. All right.
Yeah, I came back last night, but
okay. Well, I wish you well. Drive carefully.
Take care. Yeah. Well, my wife is.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, hello there.
Hello. Yeah, just filling up. What's this bits of stuff the Hennesnet now? Just you keep on talking about the brocher of it's about Hanor and associated with this. Yeah, so but don't we say mitzvah stuff the Hennesnet now? So I mean,
no, yes, sir. As we discussed at the beginning, we're not talking about mitzvahs here. We're talking about someone who wants to have a salt beef sandwich on a Sunday afternoon. Not normally a mitzvah to have a salt beef sandwich on a Sunday afternoon.
I thought you were talking about Kiddush or Motzi.
So that's one part. When we're making Kiddush, and there are two parts to the Kiddush. There's a Ber Gofen and drinking the wine.
Yeah.
And that really is Hanor. And that goes together with the Kiddush itself, which is the second bracha. Now, it's true, mitzvahs lav lehonos nitnu, but yes, the mitzvah of making Kiddush is together with a glass of wine, which you should enjoy. The mitzvah of eating matzah means you've got to eat matzah. I mean, and when you say enjoy it, you're benefiting, enjoying, having a piece of matzah, and therefore you'd have to make them. Now, when we say there's mitzvahs lav lehonos nitnu, that's when it's totally like, for example, blowing a shofar. Even if you enjoy the sound of a shofar, the mitzvah is not there really for you to enjoy. I mean, you can enjoy blowing the shofar. Whereas here we're talking about making Kiddush, which is automatically deriving benefit, enjoying the wine together with the Kiddush. And that's why we had this question, is that a bracha purely, as in any other case, of just a benefit, and therefore you cannot make a bracha for someone else unless you're benefiting too? Or in that case, in this case, you couple them both together. And as we've seen, it is this second view, which is the halacha, which means if you are making Kiddush for someone, you can do so even if you are not actually making Kiddush yourself, and you're therefore making Ber Gofen, which is a bracha for benefit.
So in which situation is it of relevance to say mitzvah slav henderson? I mean, we said it a few weeks ago, I seem to recall. What's the situation when it would apply when you say mitzvah slav henderson? Would that be
exactly that point? The mitzvahs of blowing a shofar.
Yeah.
Even if you made a neder not to derive benefit, well, you're not. There's no benefit.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. So you'd still be yoitzer. Okay, I'm with you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's
right. But
right.
the other point is you talked about the matzah making the bracha, and then I mean you're mekayim the mitzvah even if you haven't made a bracha. Is that correct? I mean, is the bracha, or is that incorrect?
Well, no.
A bracha stands in the way of whether you.
The bracha will stand in the way because you've got to make a bracha of hamritzi before you eat the matzah. So if you take lulav
without making a bracha, presumably you still mekayim the mitzvah.
Oh, that's true. That's absolutely true. You're right. What you're saying is you eat matzah without making alachilas matzah.
Yeah.
You've done the mitzvah of matzah, but you still have not. You've eaten matzah without making a bracha of hametzi on it. There are two parts to it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, the mitzvah of matzah.
And the benefit part. The benefit part needs a hametzi, and then you have the other part, which is the achilas matzah. So if we can just, Peter, go back to that halacha again. Very interesting point at the end of this. Just where your arrow is just slightly higher. Kosvu, last word of the line. Yes. Kosva poskim im kamo anoshim oisim mitzvah achas mitzvah lechatchilo she'echod yuvorech lekulom. It is a mitzvah that one person should make for everybody. The barov om hadras melech. With a lot of people, there's more splendor for the king. Ein le'el. Very interesting halacha, which the Mishnah Berurah is paskin here. Now, back to faces, if we can. I say that because amongst the Sfardisha, or not even Sfardisha, amongst the Hasidisha world, the halacha is that people make their own kiddush. So again, a Friday night situation. Depends where you were. Amongst the Ashkenazim, you can see there from the Mishnah Berurah that you'd have one person making kiddush for everybody. Amongst the Hasidim, I can see you, Malcolm, hold a sec. Amongst the Hasidim, the minhag often is, we paskin, they paskin, not like this, that often different people will be making Kiddush themselves, even if they could hear. I'm not talking about whether, you've got so many people you can't hear the Kiddush. So a very interesting difference there between the Ashkenazim and say that the Litvish, or certainly the German minhagim, Yekish. One person would be making Kiddush for everybody around the table. Amongst the Hasidic world, you'd often find different people making Kiddush, because although it says Barovam Hadras Melech, it's not used in that context, but individuals will be making their own Kiddush themselves. Malcolm, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of an obvious one, but I just wonder if you can maybe explain the derivation. So in the end, the argument was decided by the fact that Rav Papi did something, and that seems to satisfy everybody. There's an argument before that was saying the opposite. And then... No, 1 minute. We had a later Gemara here. This is, you see, Rava, Rachba, asking the question, how do we paskin here? Yes.
I don't know what the answer is. Says Rav Ashi, I can tell you, I saw this great sage, and I was there. Did he say he was there? Yes, I was there. I was sitting at the table at Rav Papi, the great rabbi, and he did exactly that. His workman came in late. He'd already made Kiddush, and he made Kiddush for him, even though he wasn't eating anymore. He wasn't drinking anymore. So you're quite right. We often do that. We bring an earlier source to prove the point. Nobody disagrees. We had a question. We've got now a source of somebody who clearly is on this one particular side, and therefore that is how we're going to paskin.
Yeah, but can I just sort of raise the sort of devil's advocate, just to say that previous to that you had the Ahava ben Rabbi Zeira, who worked out logically that you could do it, Gemara, but not for the Kiddush.
No, the previous Gemara said there are two options.
No,
you're quite. Let me just. You may have missed that.
It said she'im lo yatsa motzi ve'im yatsa eino motzi.
Yes, and a normal glass of wine on a Sunday, it doesn't work. You're quite right. That was a statement. The question we were asking is, when you have wine together with a Kiddush, does it really upgrade that bracha for wine or not? And the answer is yes, it does. It upgrades it. So you're quite right.
Because you're linking it.
In the normal situation, it's very clear. You cannot make a Ber Piagofen for somewhere on a Sunday afternoon having a glass of wine, unless you're drinking the wine. Yeah?
So it's linked to the mitzvah, is what you're saying. You're helping them perform the mitzvah.
Yes,
it's like you're being a help
with it. Right? Does it upgrade that bracha Ber Piagofen? And the answer is yes, it does.
So in fact, is it not a mitzvah to be doing that, because you're actually helping? You are helping somebody.
Yes, that is the final conclusion. Absolutely. So if you went into someone's house, they can't make Kiddush, then make a bracha for them, and you can leave. Don't even have to stay. So on your way home from or Friday night or whatever, you can pop into someone. They don't have to make Kiddush for them, including Ber Piagofen, and say, "I'm not staying here. They're waiting for me at home," and then go home and in this, that's how we would paskin. But I mentioned this point about the Rovam Hadros Melech, so watch out for that. A wonderful story about this, which I heard from someone. It was in the house of Reb Moshe Feinstein, Zichron Lebracha, great sage, and there was somebody called Reb Zlotowitz. I don't know if people are familiar with Reb Zlotowitz. He's written a lot of sadly, also Oliver Sholem, Zichron Lebracha, and he's written a lot as one of the authors of many of the Art Scroll Sforim, some of the English. Reb Zlotowitz has written a lot of wonderful works. Anyway, as a young boy, he was invited Friday night to Rav Moshe Feinstein house, and around that table were seated great sages. And this young boy, whether he knew him or obviously knew him from I don't know how. Anyway, he's a young boy, very young boy. and he's sitting around the table of Rav Moshe Feinstein with all these great sages of the generation, and it's Rav Moshe's house. So in front of Rav Moshe is his cup. And he says to this young Reb Zlotovitz, well, he wasn't a rabbi then, I don't think. He was just a young teenager or whatever. And he says to him, what's your minig? Is your minig that, like we saw in the Mishnah Berurah, that one person makes kiddush for everybody? Or is your minig that you make your own kiddush? As I say, a lot of Hasidim say, making kiddush, everybody makes their own kiddush. So this young lad said, if it's okay with Rav Moshe, I actually normally make my own kiddush. So if there's another cup of wine, I'd like to make my own kiddush. Rav Moshe took his cup and passed it across to him. And he said, my minhag is that one person makes kiddush for everybody. Your minhag is that you always make kiddush. In which case, would you mind making kiddush for all of us, please? And apparently, he could have dropped through the floor. Can you imagine how nervous he was making kiddush in front of Rav Moshe? Although Rav Moshe, the wonderful, he wouldn't have made anything. But apparently, it's sittering, and I'm not sure what happened to that wine and how much of it was actually displaced. But anyway, so that was a beautiful story. But it just shows you these two different minhagim, how they go together. Let's just continue the Gemara, please. The wine is beckoning. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanon, Lo yifrois odom prusa la'orchim. Do not cut a piece, a prusa, for your visitors. Elo imkein oichelim moem. Oh, wow, that's exactly what we've seen before. We know that rule. Have a look at Rashi. Lo yifrois birkas hamoitzi kuda omrinon la'el. This was a point you made, Malcolm. She'ena choiv. You don't have to have a piece of bread. In fact, the doctor may say it's not a good idea. We're not talking about Shabbos here. Lo yochlu v'lo yivarchu. Don't eat and don't make a bracha. So therefore, if you are giving a piece of bread to your orchim, and it sounds like they can't make brachas, don't do that unless you are eating with them, because otherwise, if they can't make a bracha, how are they going to make a bracha? So eat with them, and then you can do that. Avol poras hu lebonov ulivnei beisai, as we saw before, kedei lachanchon b'mitzvahs. We already saw that in that Mishnah Berurah or the Shulchan Aruch. You can do that for chinuch purposes. You could make a bracha. That's very interesting. Or in schools, I suppose. Imagine you've got the school teacher, and you've got around the class, and you could make a bracha for them to teach them how to make a bracha. Hamoitzi lechem min haaretz, even though you are not eating anything yourself. Again, it's the same principle. That hamoitzi is a mitzvah because you're teaching the children how to make bracha. And the final halacha here, when it comes to Hallel and Megillah, this brisa, Hallel, beautiful, just as we're talking about it now with Chanukah, Hallel and Megillah, Afal Pi Sheyotza Moitzi. Now, Megillah is pretty clear, I suppose, but that's what we've got here. We're saying when it comes to Hallel and Megillah, even if you are Yotza already, you could be Moitze Megillah. Of course, we know that halacha about Megillah, but Hallel as well. That's an interesting one. People making Hallel, you could go and make a bracha on Hallel for other individuals because, as you'd understand, that's a mitzvah. So it's just picking up mitzvahs there, and that principle applies even if you are not being yotzi yourself. You could make it for others, particularly Hallel. You see, there's no mention there even that you assuming. I mean, don't forget in those days there wasn't so many Sidurim around, and not everybody would know Hallel. Certainly, not everybody would be able to read the Megillah, and therefore it would be assumed if you were the chazan or the rabbi and you knew how to say Hallel, you could say Hallel for other individuals. Whether or not they, as we've seen before, strictly speaking, even if they could, you can say Hallel and Megillah for them. That's no problem making those brachas. And that's really what happens. If you go around laning the Megillah, you could lane the Megillah for someone else and make the bracha before. Although better still, if, as we've seen, as there is this argument, if you remember, if the individual knows how to make a bracha, they should make a bracha. And that does happen. If you go around to individuals, let's say you went around to a gentleman who couldn't get to shul, and you're laning the Megillah for him, then he can make the bracha al mikra Megillah, and the other person could then read the Megillah for him. If he can't make that bracha, not capable of doing so, then you could make the bracha yourself, and that wouldn't be a problem at all. And with that, gentlemen, I would say Hadron Aloch Ro'uhu Bezdin Beli Neder. We look forward to coming back. Or some people say Hadron from Russian Hadar, Hodor, beautiful. It's really been beautiful, this perek, tricky perek it's been. So Hadron Aloch Ro'uhu Bezdin. And L'chaim, everybody, I'm going to pour myself a glass of something. What do you want, a glass of wine? Whatever you want. Now, as we've just seen, I can't make a bracha for anybody else. We hire it anyway. So you have to make your own, but I'll have a glass. Anybody else there? Shana? Oh, I think we've got somebody joining us with a glass of wine.
I had one more question. Am I allowed?
Yeah, one last question. Are you joining us, Shana? So we have my wife's joining us.
Mazel tov to you all. Mazel tov. Hi, Mazel tov. Oops, sorry.
It's all right.
We've got our granddaughters from Manchester.
Got some granddaughters. We're in Israel. We have some granddaughters with us from Israel. Hello there.
And Tali.
And Tali as well. All come all the way to spend Hanukkah with.
L'chaim to you all, and a big, big Mazel tov. Wonderful.
I don't know if you can have whatever you like, whiskey or whatever. I know there's a question still from Malcolm we'll get to. But meanwhile, everybody, l'chaim. It's been a wonderful Masech, a wonderful perek. And moving onwards and upwards. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei peri hagofen.
Amen.
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 Okay, Mervyn, I don't know if you've got any whiskey with you down there, or
Mazel tov, mazel
Mazel
tov.
tov. Wonderful. Malcolm's got a quick question for us.
Well, I was just going to extend it to the candle lighting. I was just wondering about the bracha on the candle lighting for Hanukkah.
Could you make a bracha for someone else?
Yes, I mean that's normally what actually happens, isn't it? That if you have
but that's
group.
fine. Now,
So
don't forget, if you are fulfilling the mitzvah yourself, there's never a problem.
But are you fulfilling the mitzvah? Can other
Yes.
people attending the lighting be yotzi of lighting the candles?
No, a good question. Very good question. The person should be lighting in their own home, right? If people are staying with you or your family, then while you make the bracha, you're making the bracha for them as well. You're all being motzi. However, if those individuals are not staying with you, they really should be lighting the candles in their own home. In which case you couldn't, because you're not at their home. But what you could do, imagine you went to their home and they don't know how to light a menorah, or they don't know what the bracha is and they can't say the bracha. Then, as we've said before, with mitzvahs, you can make a bracha for them. If they can make their own bracha, great. But if they can't, you can make a bracha and light for them the menorah. So it's a very good call, and that would fit in beautifully to what we've seen here. So with that, thanks. I wish you all very well. Very quickly, Peter, if you bring up the last attachment I sent you, beautiful piece there. Very quickly, as we're ready. Indeed, 11 o'clock. That's the one. Just want to show a beautiful piece here. Just at the end of Daled, it says in the Hagor, Omrim al Hanisin, V'chanikum Purim Kodem V'al Hakol. And the same, of course, we know in davening, al Hanisin. Beautiful tefillah. Kodim alakol in benching as well. Now, what happens if you forget to say ala nisim? Let me quickly go through the halachas. If you haven't said Baruch Atah Hashem Hatov Shimcha, if you're in davening, you can go back and say it. Once you've passed, like passing go in collecting your money, whatever it was, Monopoly. Once you've passed that bracha, then you've got another option. Imlo omru ein machzir inoisai. You don't go back. You don't have to repeat the whole Amid if you miss Ala Nisim. But just like this halach applies to benching, in benching at the end, remember the lot of harachamons, the all-merciful one? You can add a new harachamon which says, Hu yaseh lonu nisim, may he perform miracles for us, like he did in day old, and then you'd say b'mei matisyohu, and the same halach applies in davening. If you forget it, then when you get to the end of davening, just before you've said Oseh Shalom, before Yihul Rotzain, you'd say Harachamon Hu Yaseh Lonu Nisim. You have to remember the words. Kamoshe also bayomim oheim mazman hazeh, and then you'd say b'mei matisyohu. But the question is, this Harachamon, a very interesting Harachamon. You're making Harachamon. May you perform miracles. Do we daven for miracles? Have a look at the Sha'arei Tshuva, please. Oh, there we are. Up there, Sha'arei Tshuva. Yes. Harachamon, little base. In the Sha'arei Tshuva. Harachamon who? Ayin Mashe Kosov Adoni Ovizakeni. The Zayda, his grandfather, in the Sefer B'chor Shor, that's a hard Russian tape, isn't it? The B'chor Shor, Da'afa Gav, even though his point is this, we find in Gemara, so you're not normally praying for miracles. How come in this Harachamon, if you've forgotten, again, do you understand the Harachamon? The Harachamon for people who forgot to say Ala Nisim, and they're adding it at the end of davening or with all the Harachamons, you're praying for miracles. And the Gemara talks about we don't pray for miracles. We pray for good health, but miracles? Notice what he says. Mikomokom Kivan Sho'im, next line, Yaseh Lonu Loshen Rabim Shaper Domi. Very interesting. In other words, if you're praying on behalf of the community, you can ask for miracles to happen. Individually, not, but for the community, yes. But now have a look at the drop down a line. The gam yesh, keep going. The gam yesh l'chalek, you can also make a difference. The kagoin hahi, the milchemes hashmonoi. Yes, the fact that they were successful in battle, of course, it was miraculous. Those numbers, etc. But nevertheless, it wasn't something out of nature, if you see what I mean. That's fine. That is not considered a tefillah shov. But carry on. You need to be careful. You can't daven for a splitting of the sea. Yes, they might happen. We've got Kriyas Yam Tov, we've got miracles that have happened, which is, I say, even out of nature, but you don't pray for a miracle which is, as I say, not natural. But you can pray for a miracle within nature. What does that mean? Even in Milchama, a battle, even if the numbers are stacked against you, there you can pray to be successful because you're not asking a change in nature. Very fascinating Sha'arei Tshuva, worth remembering that. Kuf Pei Zayin, if you ever want to look it up. So yes, so we do pray, as I say, as long as it's not out of nature, we pray for good health, Yeshuas, Refuahs, and all good news. And Basuras Tov, we go back to faces as we conclude. And with that, gentlemen, we do for Chanukah, we say that Horachamon. Hopefully you don't need to say it because we remember the Alanissim in the right place, but it's nice to know there's a bit of a backup in case we miss the first opportunity. So with that, gentlemen, I wish you all a very beautiful Chanukah. It's a very, say, a lichtige Chanukah, which means a very light Chanukah. It's certainly like that round here in lots of places. Wherever you look, you see the candles or whatever the candles and the lights, beautiful. And with that, I wish you all a very, say, beautiful Chanukah. I think, Peter, you're probably